John's footsteps echoed down the sterile hospital corridor, each step a hammer against Sophia's heart. The sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with the cold fluorescent lights, creating a harsh world she had never wanted to wake up to again. But wake up she did, her lungs gasping for air, her body weak and frail, tangled in wires and tubes. The relentless beeping of the machines filled the silence, a cruel reminder of how close she had been to death, and how far from the man she once loved. 3 months ago, John had chosen his empire over her fading breath. That merger meeting he had rushed off to? It was the final nail in her coffin. She had clung to life with every ounce of strength she had, clutching those unsigned divorce papers like a lifeline and a last shield against his betrayal. But he never returned. Not then, not ever. Now, lying in that same hospital bed, the cold truth hit her like a tidal wave. Her first life had been a slow fading away, not just of her body but of her spirit, eclipsed by a man whose ambition swallowed everything, including the woman who had stood by him through every storm. Sophia wasn't that broken woman anymore. She was back, with memories sharper than ever and a fury burning inside her chest. The clock on the wall showed 2:47 p.m. The very hour her world had shattered before. John was somewhere at his precious board meeting, sealing deals that mattered more to him than her. But this time, things would be different. This time, Sophia would be the one writing the ending. Her fingers curled tightly around the thin hospital gown, the four-line a fragile tether to a past she was determined to sever. Her mind raced, memories flooding in, late nights when John came home to empty rooms, whispered phone calls about mergers and acquisitions, the distant warmth of a man she had once believed in. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly in the room, a reminder of what once was and what had been lost forever. A flood of bitterness and cold clarity washed over her. She had been invisible, a ghost in her own life while John built his empire with ruthless precision. And the rival she had barely noticed before, Ryan, stood on the other side of that boardroom table. Unlike John, Ryan was known not just for power but for honor. The thought of him was like a spark in the darkness. He represented everything John was not: loyalty, respect, a man who saw the woman behind the wife's facade. Sophia's breath hitched as she realized the road ahead was one she had no choice but to travel, away from the husband who chose power over love, and toward the man who might finally see her worth. Her heartbeat steadied, each beat a drum of defiance. The sterile room around her felt less like a prison and more like a battleground. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and the future she deserved. The hospital door creaked open and a nurse stepped in, checking monitors and scribbling notes. Sophia's gaze sharpened. Every second counted. She could feel the weight of the divorce papers under her hand, not just ink on paper but a symbol of broken promises and a weapon for what was to come. Tears threatened, but she swallowed them down. Weakness had no place here. The woman who had died was gone. In her place stood someone forged in pain but tempered by a new fire. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a shaky breath. The world outside that hospital room was moving fast, decisions were being made, alliances forged, and fates sealed. But Sophia was no longer a passive player. This time, she would be the one holding the cards. Her lips pressed into a determined line as she whispered, "This time, I win." ChatGPT said. Sophia's memories unfolded like a delicate tapestry, woven with threads of love, hope, and quiet disappointment. Before rebirth, she had been the devoted wife of John, a man whose brilliance in business was only matched by his emotional distance at home. Their life together had begun with promises whispered under starlit skies, dreams of partnership and shared futures. Sophia had believed in those promises with all her heart. She remembered their wedding day, the way John's dark eyes had held hers with rare tenderness, the brief moments when his guard lowered and vulnerability peeked through. But as the years passed, those moments became fleeting. John's world had shrunk to the size of his office, his meetings, and the constant hum of deals being made. Sophia had tried to bridge the growing gap, filling their home with warmth and laughter, but the walls between them only grew higher. Evenings were often spent alone, the clink of glasses on polished tables replaced by the distant buzz of his phone. John was a man who thrived on control, his mind always calculating the next move, the next acquisition. Sophia had once admired his dedication, believing his ambition would secure their future. Instead, it became a barrier she could not cross. The love they once shared was buried beneath spreadsheets and conference calls. In the quiet moments, Sophia had confided in Deborah, John's executive assistant, whose unwavering loyalty to John masked a sharper understanding of his flaws. Deborah was efficient and silent, a shadow that followed John's footsteps without question. Sophia had sensed a subtle tension in their interactions, as if Deborah was the keeper of secrets Sophia was never meant to uncover. Amidst this emotional drought, Ryan emerged as a stark contrast. A successful CEO known for his integrity and quiet confidence, Ryan had built his reputation on fairness and respect. Unlike John, he was approachable, his presence commanding without demanding. Sophia had met Ryan only a handful of times, brief exchanges at charity events or industry galas, but each encounter left a lasting impression. Ryan's gaze held a sincerity that John's never did. Where John wielded power like a weapon, Ryan used his influence to uplift those around him. Sophia admired his strength but also envied the ease with which he navigated both business and personal realms. In Ryan, she glimpsed the possibility of something different, someone who could see her not as an accessory to success but as a partner. The rivalry between John and Ryan was well known in corporate circles, a silent war fought with strategy and subtle maneuvering. John viewed Ryan as a threat, a challenge to be outsmarted and defeated. For Sophia, that rivalry was both a warning and a beacon. It was a reminder of John's ruthless side and a glimpse into a world where respect and honor still mattered. Sophia's relationship with John had been marked by this growing divide, a husband consumed by his empire and a wife yearning for connection. Her hopes had dimmed over time, replaced by the cold reality that John's heart belonged more to his career than to her. Yet, beneath that disappointment, a spark of resilience remained, one that would soon ignite into something fierce. The house they shared bore the traces of their fading love. Photographs lined the walls, smiling faces frozen in happier times. The scent of fresh flowers, once a symbol of John's affection, now felt like a distant memory. Sophia's days were filled with routine and quiet solitude, her voice often unheard amidst the cacophony of John's ambitions. As she lay in her hospital bed, memories of these years stirred within her, fueling the fire that had brought her back. She was no longer willing to be sidelined or silenced. The man who had chosen his career over her life would soon learn that she was a force to be reckoned with. With Ryan's name echoing in her thoughts, Sophia felt a newfound clarity. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was hers to command. She would not just reclaim what was lost, she would redefine her destiny. John stood by the sleek conference table, his gaze fixed on the sprawling cityscape outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The merger deal he was about to finalize promised to catapult his company to unprecedented heights. Every executive in the room waited on his command, anticipating the signature that would seal their future. Yet, beneath the surface of polished suits and strategic discussions, a far more personal and devastating choice loomed. Back in the hospital room, Sophia's breaths came shallow and uneven. Her body was fragile, tethered to machines that beeped rhythmically, marking the steady march toward an uncertain fate. She had hoped, prayed even, that John would choose her, that he would abandon the boardroom and sit by her side, hold her hand, tell her she wasn't alone. But those hopes were dashed when a nurse relayed his message: the merger was more important. Her heart fractured with each passing hour John remained absent. The divorce papers, thin and unsigned, rested on the bedside table. They were meant to be a shield, a safeguard against further pain, but in her weakened state, they felt more like chains, binding her to a reality she desperately wanted to escape. As her vision blurred, the cold truth settled over her: she was alone in the final chapter of her life. John's footsteps echoed in the corridor, but they were steps away from her room, not inside it. His voice, usually warm and familiar, carried a detached urgency over the phone when he spoke to his associates. The merger was a battle to win, and he was a general who refused to retreat. Sophia's fading consciousness clung to fragments of memories, the last smile he gave her weeks ago, the whispered apologies that rang hollow against the deafening silence of his absence. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the hospital gown, clutching the divorce papers as if they could anchor her soul. The machine's beeping slowed, and darkness crept in. In those final moments, the weight of betrayal was unbearable. John had chosen the cold embrace of ambition over the warmth of love, and Sophia's world ended not with a goodbye but with a quiet surrender. But death was not the end. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, the sterile light of the hospital room greeting her once more. The antiseptic smell was sharper, the beeping louder, yet this time, something inside her burned differently. The pain of her first life, the sting of abandonment, and the bitter taste of betrayal had forged a new resolve. She was not the woman who had faded away. She was reborn, awakened with purpose and fury. Her gaze fell upon the unsigned divorce papers beneath her hand. They no longer symbolized defeat, they were the weapon she would wield. The man who had let her die would face consequences he never imagined. The merger that had once seemed like John's greatest victory would now be the battleground for his downfall. Sophia sat up slowly, the hospital gown clinging to her skin as if reluctant to let go. Her heart, once fragile and broken, now thumped with triumphant strength. The clock read 2:47 p.m., time slipping swiftly toward John's critical meeting. But this time, Sophia was ready. The past was a ghost, and the future was hers to reclaim. Her fingers brushed against the phone on the bedside table, recalling the password John had thought secret. A code once romantic, now a key to unlocking his empire's darkest secrets. The rival she had once seen as a distant figure, Ryan, was no longer just a name. He was her ally, her shield, and the force that would help her dismantle everything John had built on lies. The air in the room felt charged, thick with the promise of retribution. Sophia's eyes burned with determination as she whispered to herself, "This time, it's my turn." Sophia lay awake in the quiet hospital room, the pale moonlight filtering through the blinds casting long shadows on the sterile walls. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors seemed to echo the tumult inside her chest, a storm of pain, rage, and grief that refused to be silenced. She had been given a second chance, but the scars of her first life still ran deep, raw and unhealed. Her mind replayed the haunting images of abandonment, John's indifferent gaze as he walked away to chase his ambitions, the cold absence that stretched between them like an unbridgeable chasm. In those moments, she had felt utterly powerless, a ghost trapped in a world that no longer needed her. The loneliness had crushed her spirit, and the final clasp of those unsigned divorce papers had sealed her fate. But now, everything was different. The helplessness that had once defined her existence was replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. Her eyes, once clouded with despair, now glinted with clarity and purpose. She no longer belonged to the woman who had faded quietly into oblivion, she was someone forged anew, tempered by betrayal but unbroken. Tears welled up, not from weakness but from the weight of emotions long suppressed. The grief for lost years, the fury for the deception she endured, and the ache of love turned to ashes, all mingled in a painful symphony. Yet beneath it all was a quiet strength, a whisper of hope that grew louder with every breath. Sophia's thoughts turned to the man who had shattered her life. John's brilliance in the boardroom was undeniable, but his heart had been absent when she needed it most. The realization fueled a complex storm of emotions. Anger surged. How could someone choose a deal over a promise, a merger over a marriage? Yet, she also felt pity for the man who was blinded by ambition, who mistook power for love. In the depths of her turmoil, Sophia found a strange solace in planning. The chaos in her mind began to take shape, focusing into calculated steps. She was no longer a victim adrift in the currents of fate but a strategist poised to reclaim what was hers. Every memory of John's lies, the embezzlement, the late-night secrets, the betrayal, became ammunition in her arsenal. She pictured the rival, Ryan, whose name stirred both curiosity and cautious hope. Unlike John, Ryan's strength lay in integrity and honor. Could he be the ally she needed? The thought ignited a flicker of light in the darkness. Sophia knew trust would be a fragile thing, but she was willing to grasp it if it meant justice. Her body ached from weakness, but her mind raced with possibilities. She envisioned confrontations in boardrooms bathed in cold light, legal battles fought with sharp words and sharper evidence. The path ahead was daunting, but every challenge was a step toward liberation. In rare moments of vulnerability, doubt crept in. Was she strong enough to endure the fight? Could she face the man who had broken her and stand tall? The questions were ghosts at the edges of her resolve, but she refused to let them consume her. Instead, Sophia drew strength from memories of her own resilience, the quiet courage that had carried her through darkest nights before rebirth. She was a survivor, not merely of illness but of betrayal and loss. The pain was real, but it no longer had the power to define her. As dawn approached, she sat up in bed, determination setting her jaw firm. The second chance she'd been given was not just to live, but to fight. To dismantle the empire built on lies. To expose the man who had chosen power over love. To reclaim her life and dignity. Her eyes hardened with purpose as she whispered into the stillness, "I will not be invisible again." Sophia sat quietly in the dim light of her hospital room, the steady hum of machines fading into the background as her mind sharpened with newfound clarity. The fragments of John's world, the polished exterior, the carefully crafted public image, were beginning to crack. What lay beneath was far darker than she had ever imagined. Weeks of piecing together scattered documents, whispered conversations, and furtive glances from Deborah had led her to a grim truth: John's empire was built on deception. Embezzlement masked by layers of falsified reports, siphoning funds from the company's pension to fuel risky mergers and personal luxuries. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. The man she had once loved had betrayed not just her but everyone who trusted him. Deborah, once merely a silent presence in John's life, had become an unlikely ally. Her loyalty to John had faltered when she witnessed the consequences of his greed. Quietly, she passed Sophia encrypted files, ledgers, email exchanges, voice recordings, evidence that painted a vivid picture of fraud and manipulation. With each revelation, Sophia's resolve hardened. But confronting John alone was a perilous path. That's when Ryan entered her life, not just as a rival, but as a protector. Their meetings began cautiously, conversations laced with wariness and unspoken histories. Yet Ryan's reputation for integrity and his quiet strength gave Sophia something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Ryan listened without judgment, his sharp mind quickly grasping the depth of John's betrayal. Unlike John's circle of enablers, Ryan offered genuine partnership. Together, they devised a plan not only to expose the financial crimes but to dismantle the very foundation of John's power. Sophia found herself drawn to Ryan's steadiness, a stark contrast to John's cold ambition. He was not merely an adversary but a collaborator, sharing her vision of justice and renewal. Their alliance was forged in the crucible of shared purpose, an unspoken bond growing stronger with each strategic move. As the pieces fell into place, Sophia felt the tide turning. The empire that had seemed untouchable was vulnerable, its cracks widening beneath the weight of truth. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time, Sophia was not alone. Her eyes burned with determination as she prepared to confront John, not just as the betrayed wife, but as a force poised to reclaim what was stolen and rewrite the rules of power. Sophia stepped into the grand boardroom, the polished mahogany table reflecting the intense expressions of the executives gathered. The air was thick with tension, the murmurs of speculation fading as all eyes locked onto her. She was no longer the fragile woman John had abandoned in a hospital bed. Now, she stood with unshakable confidence, armed with evidence that would shatter an empire. John sat at the head of the table, his usual arrogance replaced by a tight, brittle mask. He glanced at Sophia, eyes narrowing, but the certainty in her gaze was undeniable. Beside her stood Ryan, calm and composed, a silent pillar of strength. Without hesitation, Sophia began. Her voice was steady, each word deliberate and piercing. She unveiled documents, emails, and audio recordings, irrefutable proof of John's embezzlement and deceit. The room grew silent, the weight of betrayal settling heavily on every shoulder. Executives exchanged glances, shock rippling through the ranks as the layers of John's carefully constructed facade crumbled. John's protests were sharp but hollow. He scrambled to defend himself, citing forged reports and questioning the legitimacy of the evidence. Yet, Sophia's prepared rebuttals and Ryan's unwavering presence left no room for doubt. The tide had turned. Cameras from the media team captured every moment, broadcasting the unfolding drama beyond the walls of the building. The public watched as John's empire, once untouchable, was laid bare, his reputation unraveling with each revelation. The board voted swiftly, stripping John of his CEO position and initiating legal proceedings. His power, once absolute, dissolved in the face of truth. Humiliated and defeated, John's demeanor shifted from anger to desperation, the reality of his downfall sinking in. In the aftermath, Sophia assumed her place at the table's head, the weight of leadership settling comfortably on her shoulders. Ryan's alliance was no longer just strategic, it was personal. Together, they began rebuilding, turning the ruins of betrayal into a foundation for renewal. The city skyline outside gleamed under the setting sun, a symbol of endings and new beginnings. Sophia's journey from victim to victor was complete, her strength a beacon for anyone who had been broken but refused to remain silent. Sophia sat behind the expansive glass desk, the city skyline sprawling beyond the towering windows of her new office. The air was filled with the subtle hum of success, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room where she had once fought for her life. Now, she ruled an empire reborn from ashes, not just as a figurehead but as a leader who had reclaimed her power with unyielding determination. Beside her, Ryan moved effortlessly through the bustling floor, his presence a steady force that complemented her vision. Their partnership was more than a business alliance, it was a testament to resilience forged through betrayal and triumph. Together, they navigated board meetings, strategic decisions, and the complex dance of corporate politics, united by a shared commitment to integrity and growth. John's downfall echoed in the halls of the very building where he once commanded respect. Legal battles ensued swiftly, embezzlement charges, asset freezes, and public hearings stripped him of his former stature. The man who had once been untouchable was now a cautionary tale whispered in executive circles. His social standing crumbled alongside his corporate influence, leaving behind a legacy marred by greed and deceit. Sophia's journey was not without scars. The memories of abandonment and heartbreak lingered, but they no longer defined her. Each challenge she overcame strengthened the core of who she had become, a woman transformed from victim to victor. The pain that once threatened to consume her had been channeled into purpose, fueling a drive to protect what was hers and build something enduring. In moments of quiet reflection, Sophia acknowledged the complexity of her emotions. Revenge had been a starting point, but empowerment was her true victory. She had reclaimed her narrative, rewriting a story once dominated by loss into one illuminated by strength and hope. The partnership with Ryan was a beacon of new beginnings, a reminder that trust could be rebuilt and futures reimagined. As the company flourished under their leadership, Sophia remained grounded in the lessons of her past. She fostered a culture of transparency and respect, determined that no one else would suffer the betrayal she had endured. Her voice, once silenced by circumstance, now resonated with clarity and authority. The echoes of John's defeat were balanced by the promise of what lay ahead. Sophia stood not only as a symbol of survival but as an inspiration to those who faced their own battles. Her story was a testament to the power of resilience, the necessity of justice, and the enduring strength found in embracing one's worth. With Ryan by her side, she faced the future unafraid, ready to build a legacy defined not by past pain but by the courage to rise anew. Sophia stood alone on the balcony of her office, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin as the city lights flickered like distant stars below. The weight of the past, the betrayals, the pain, the nights spent in silence, felt as if it were finally lifting, dissolving into the crisp night air. She took a deep breath, savoring the moment of stillness that stretched before her, a rare peace that had once seemed impossible. Her eyes traced the horizon, where the first hints of dawn began to soften the darkness. It was a symbol, she realized, a promise that every ending carried within it the seed of a new beginning. The woman who had once been broken was gone, replaced by someone who had reclaimed her life and shaped it with unyielding strength. The divorce papers that had once represented loss now lay tucked away, their power diminished by the courage she had found within herself. John's shadow no longer loomed over her world, she had stepped into the light of her own making. The empire she now led was not just built on business acumen but on the foundations of resilience and justice. Ryan's presence was a comforting warmth behind her, a reminder that she was not alone in this new chapter. Their partnership was forged not just in shared goals but in mutual respect and genuine trust. Together, they had transformed pain into power, loss into legacy. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat steady and strong. Each pulse was a testament to survival, to rebirth. She had faced the darkest storms and emerged whole, unshaken by the tempests that once threatened to consume her. In that moment, she whispered a silent vow, to herself and to the future, that she would continue to move forward, guided by the lessons of her past but never held captive by them. The control she had fought so hard to reclaim was hers to keep, a beacon lighting the way toward peace and purpose. The city below pulsed with life, endless and vibrant, much like the possibilities that awaited her. Sophia stepped back from the railing, a gentle smile touching her lips. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led her here, standing tall, embraced by hope and the quiet certainty that she was finally free. As the first rays of morning kissed the skyline, Sophia felt a profound sense of closure. The past was a chapter forever closed, and the future stretched wide with promise. She was reborn, not just in body but in spirit, and the peace she sought was no longer a distant dream but a living reality. With calm resolve, she turned from the balcony, ready to face the day and all that it held. The woman who had once lost everything had found herself again, and nothing could ever take that away.